Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is Bob Mendelsohn, and this is the Bob's Your Uncle podcast. What follows in today's episode of less than 5 minutes is what some call a meditation, a thought, a devotional to assist you in thinking along with me about a certain topic. And in this 5-part season, we're looking at the first chapter of the Newer Testament in the Bible. That means in less than 25 minutes, you will have considered what Matthew, a tax collector, had to say about the characters in the genealogy of Yeshua, the Jew, and why we should consider him as relevant in the 21st century. Thanks for joining me here by the fireplace. Devotional number 4. 3 times 14 equals 42. We read in chapter 1 of Matthew, Jesse was the father of David the king. Josiah became the father of Jeconiah and his brothers at the time of the deportation to Babylon. Jacob was the father of Joseph, the husband of Mary, by whom Jesus was born, who's called the Messiah. So all the generations from Abraham to David are 14 generations. From David to the deportation to Babylon, 14 generations. And from the deportation to Babylon to the Messiah, 14 generations. I used to teach mathematics in the U.S. in the 1970s. I still love puzzles and number quizzes I find online. When Matthew writes his genealogy, he breaks the history of Israel into 3 significant eras: Abraham to David, David to the Exile, and from that time to the time of Messiah. Each is listed as being 14 generations long. Unfortunately, the time of those eras are not even. It's approximately 1,000 years from Abraham to David, then 400 years from David to the exile from Judah, and finally 600 from that exile to the Messiah. But approximations work for me and for the biblical writers. Even so, don't be distracted by the unevenness of the eras. Matthew actually leaves out some people so as to make 3 equal lists of 14 folks, the ones who defined their generation. And the number 42 is used by John in the Revelation to define a maximum time for the difficulties of the people of God, which of course was also not exact, but simply spoke to the people of his day about the temporary nature of suffering. For John, suffering will end, Yeshua will come back, and victory will be permanent. But what else do we learn from the 3 by 14? It's a useful tool to define an era and was a very common method in Jewish history. People are more memorable than dates anyway. And 6 units of 7s, which also equals 42, are harder to keep track of. 3 units of 14, much easier. And those 3 represent the highs and lows of Jewish life, from Abraham and David, serious high points, to the exile to Babylon in 586 BCE, one of the lowest moments in Jewish history. But be assured, no matter the times in which you live, the good or the bad, the ups or the downs, for you or your family or your country, God is in control. And at the end of the day, Messiah will rule. Suffering will end. Victory will be permanent. Thanks for joining me for this episode 4 of the interim season 2 of the Bob's Your Uncle podcast. Remember, when things seem bleak or uncertain, look up to God. He's in his heaven. And Bob's your uncle. Shalom from Sydney.